The problem with the current Israel-Gaza war is the presence of ideologies on both the left and the right, and a refusal to recognize historical facts. The historical facts are clear. In the Clinton administration, there was an attempt to establish a Palestinian state. Arafat rejected it. I think there were two attempts, and I think Hillary Clinton was part of the second attempt when she was Secretary of State. And 50,000 Israelis were forcibly evicted from the Gaza territory, where they'd been developing greenhouses and agriculture, and this was left for the Palestinians to cultivate and take over when Gaza was left as its own self-controlled area, and then it was taken over by Hamas. And that's a historical fact. And the problem with the left wing, and possibly with people even like Owen Jones, is that the rhetoric is mixed up with anti-Zionism. So the anti-Netanyahu trope, which of course I entirely endorse, is mixed up with anti-Zionism, which I don't endorse, and anti-Semitism, which I absolutely repudiate. But it's also mixed up with anti-imperialism and the settler-colonist trope, and the idea that the old ideas of anti-Semitism, which are present in the 19th century, in the right-wing gutter press, and in the writings of people like Düring, in the language and the discussions about the Dreyfus affair, and certainly in the rise of the determined opposition to Jews during the time of Stalin. I was a member of a university in Moscow that had once been the women's university and then became the Jewish university. It was the place to put Jews when they weren't allowed in any other university. If that's not a statement of anti-Semitism, I can't think really what is. And that was very much during the time of Stalin on through into the 1990s. Many of my friends in that university had been there because they were Jewish and because that was the only university they were allowed to attend. It's absurd. And this was at a time when the USSR was putting forward ideas that there was a connivance between Zionists and fascists, even to the extent that Zionists were involved in the Holocaust. Absurd, ridiculous, but part of the propaganda of communism and of control. And we're getting the same sort of nonsense peddled simply because people don't have the language to articulate their frustration with Netanyahu's razing of Gaza to the ground, and they want to embrace an ism and an ideology which encapsulates their frustration. Why not just simply identify the reality? The reality is that Netanyahu is wrong, and that so many people have died as a result of his misguided approach to defense, to self-defense, aided and abetted by so many people in the West, unable to distinguish between the right to self-defense and the form that it took, and the form that it was demonstrably going to take. Netanyahu was quite clear about what he intended to do, and the fact that it was going to take a long time. and the fact that it was going to upset the West. All of this was very clear in the days immediately following October the 7th, when the plans were rolled out by the IDF and by Netanyahu. And yet, for some reason, maybe the American government thought that this siege of Gaza would take place quicker and less destructively than Israel was warning. Israel was right. Israel was absolutely right. This is what it intended to do. This is how destructive it was going to be. And there would come a point when the world would turn against Israel. That's exactly what has happened. And yet nobody at that point in Britain or in America was able to articulate the fact that self-defense is right and the siege of Gaza in this particular form was wrong. The only siege of Gaza that could possibly have taken place, that could possibly have been justified, would have been a global response and an international brigade. And even then, it needed to be approached with some sort of medical precision. And I don't know whether that was possible. Greater efforts needed to be made by the benign Arab states in the neighborhood of Israel to negotiate, and negotiating at the point of a gun was not the way forward. Netanyahu has managed to alienate Israel, has managed to make Israel into the pariah state of the Middle East. It's an astonishing achievement in such a short space of time. And a leader needs to arise from Israel who is going to change that. And the vocal support that Netanyahu commands from the right wing of the country is significant. Even if there are thousands of people gathered outside the Knesset, even today, demanding Netanyahu's resignation. Israel needs to rebuild its image. And it starts with thinking about ideology and thinking about branding. But both the right wing and the left wing in Western politics needs to consider its own position and to reflect on the language which is used in the streets and the sloganizing. There is only one slogan that is appropriate, which is that Netanyahu is wrong. Everything else is touched with whataboutery and with grabbing slogans from the shelves, many of which are not appropriate. This is about a misjudgment of power. This is about an individual and a government in power that has gone well beyond its remit and that has managed to destroy the country. We could look at our own country, at Britain, and say, is something similar going on here? Do we have a government in power that is destructive and that is destroying our country? Not in the same way, not to the same extent, but a single individual and a single government can wreak as much harm on a country's reputation as a single government and a single person can do good.